What if there were no attacks in Pokemon? Having no way of inflicting direct damage to your opponent's Pokemon is extremely rare in a competitive scene, since even the most dedicated support mons like Whimsicott and Indeedee run at least one attack as a way of inflicting quick damage and securing kills on low HP targets in dire situations. But what if we eliminated this component entirely, and every physical and special move in Pokemon just ceased to exist? In this video, we'll be uncovering the answers to that question, as well as many more. Like, what would the top Pokemon be in the format without attacking moves, what moves and abilities would dominate the metagame, and what bans would have to be implemented for balancing purposes. Let's get into it. Moves in Pokemon are categorized into three main categories: physical, special, and status moves. Both physical and special moves typically inflict direct damage that corresponds with their base powers and additional effects, with external factors such as the user's level, ability, and damage multipliers also taken into account when calculating the damage dealt. There are some exceptions like Side Shock, a special move that deals damage to the target's physical defense, and Foul Play, which uses the target's attack stat to damage it. But that's not what we're here for today. In fact, the only moves that will be relevant in this video are status moves. Status moves are incapable of inflicting direct damage, contrary to their physical and special counterparts. A typical status move will comprise of what we know as an effect. These effects come in a diverse multitude of uses and definitions, with no straightforward purpose. For example, the status move Thunder Wave inflicts paralysis on the target when it hits, crippling it by halving its speed stat, and giving it a 30% chance to not move every turn. Moves like Recover and Life Dew allow the user to heal themselves as well as their allies. Swords Dance and Nasty Plot let the user enhance their offensive stats, and even gimmicky status moves like White Guard and Quash can be useful in certain scenarios. Your immediate thought process might be, if you can't damage enemy Pokemon directly, why not just use a move that chips away at the target's health over time like Toxic or Will-O-Wisp, both of which are commonly seen on tankier Pokemon that capitalize off their exceptional bulk to whittle away at targets over time. You wouldn't be wrong, but would such moves really be the best in an environment with so much counterplay? A Pokemon with a defensive typing like Heatran would be immune to both poison and fire type status moves entirely, making it next to untouchable. In fact, there are many more reliable ways of damaging opponents through status. A move that causes sleep like Hypnosis or Spore can be paired with Darkrai's signature ability Bad Dreams, hurting the sleeping target by an 1/8 of its max HP every turn. The Ghost type move Nightmare does this arguably better, depleting a quarter of the sleeping target's max HP per turn instead. And speaking of Ghost types, the move Curse is probably the strongest variation of these chipping moves, since Ghost type users are only required to sacrifice 50% of their max HP to deal a quarter of the target's HP every turn, rather than gambling on a 60% accurate Hypnosis to hit. Additionally, Pokemon with the ability Corrosion like Glimmora and Salazzle are capable of poisoning Poison and Steel types, which would usually be immune to such moves. Status Soakers like Heatran coming in to take an incoming Toxic would be thrown off guard, and Glimmora can also provide excellent utility by getting up hazards like Stealth Rocks and Spikes for long-term chip damage. This brings us to part 2 of the video, bans. Bans are an integral aspect of every metagame in Pokemon Showdown for the sole purpose of balancing. Pokemon, moves, abilities or items considered to be overpowered would usually undergo some form of suspect testing before having their fate determined by a community vote. Bans are not often indefinite and prone to change with time, but here are some obvious bans that I think would be detrimental to the no-attack metagame if left undealt with. Ban abilities. There are 3 big contenders for the most broken ability in this format: Magic Bounce, Prankster, and Good as Gold. Pokemon with the ability Magic Bounce reflects status moves from the target back to the user, and it is without a doubt overpowered in a world where only status moves exist, rendering strategies like Hazard Stack literally useless. However, there are few limitations to this ability's extent, since the move Switcheroo cannot be reflected by Magic Bounce, meaning if the user holds an item like a Sticky Barb or Black Sludge that hurts the user, Switcheroo will pass it on to the target regardless of Magic Bounce, allowing it to be damaged over time. Skill Swap is also unaffected by Magic Bounce, meaning the user can use it to get rid of the target's Magic Bounce and obtain it for themselves, at least for the duration of the turn. Despite this, an ability Shield will eliminate this form of counterplay entirely, making Magic Bounce more dominant as an ability than it already is, and much more deserving of a ban. But what about Prankster? Prankster gives the user a +1 priority to all of its status moves, meaning that speed is not taken into account when deducing which Pokemon will move first, as the user with Prankster will always move with priority as long as they click a status move. However, when 2 Pokemon with Prankster both select a status move in the same turn, the Pokemon with the highest speed stat will move first. This ability would be absolutely devastating for the metagame, since not only would speed as a stat become almost irrelevant, the only type of Pokemon immune to Prankster moves are Dark types. And which main Prankster abuser also happens to be a Dark type? It's Sableye. That would make the metagame much more chaotic than it already is, as games could come down to Sableye vs Sableye 1v1s, where neither of the Pokemon is capable of damaging the other. And finally, Good as Gold, the signature ability of recently introduced Pokemon Goldango. The reasoning for this is fairly straightforward. Good as Gold makes the user immune to all status moves. No exceptions, not even Switcheroo or Skill Swap, not even Defog in fact. I think we can unanimously agree on this one for pretty obvious reasons. There are zero countermeasures or counterplay to this ability, making it without a doubt the best and most broken ability in the metagame. A ban for the ability Wonder Skin could also be considered, since evasion lowering moves and abilities are often considered uncompetitive by the Smogon Council, but then again, evasion abilities are free to roam in Ubers, so I'll leave that up to you guys. Next, banned moves. Probably the most obvious ban would be the move Taunt, which prevents the opposing Pokemon from using status moves for the next few turns. Denying your Pokemon the ability to do anything for the next few turns is pretty broken by itself, and I don't think it needs any further elaboration. I'd argue that Magic Coat is also deserving of a ban. This move has essentially the same effect as Magic Bounce, except you have to dedicate a turn to selecting it instead of having it as an inbuilt defensive mechanism. So I think it would be just as powerful as Magic Bounce to a certain extent. Recycle could also be a candidate for a ban, but you may be wondering what this seemingly harmless status move is supposed to do. Well, the answer is a little complicated. Recycle on its own is just as unassuming as it looks, but it's the combination of Recycle and the Leper Berry that makes it an absolute monster. The Leper Berry restores 10 PP to one of the user's 4 moves, and Recycle allows the user to reuse a depleted item. See where I'm going with this? The infamous strategy Funbro tries off of this interaction. The user, Slowbro, uses the move Block to prevent opposing Pokemon from fleeing, then uses Slack Off to keep itself healthy, as well as Heal Pulse to ensure the trapped target never dies to struggle once all of its PPs are depleted. Slowbro can then use Recycle whenever it needs to, reusing the Leper Berry to continuously restore PP to all of its moves, and keeping the target trapped in an endless battle for eternity. Large fries, you might say. Why not just ban all trapping moves and abilities then? That way Funbro would be unviable as a whole as well. That's a valid argument to make, but there's only one reason I want trapping moves around. A certain strategy that revolves around the opponent's inability to switch out. A certain strategy that one of the world's best players has mastered to an astronomical level. Perish Trap. Yes, I think Perish Trap would be a viable strategy in a metagame without direct attacks. Take a second to breathe, throw your tomatoes, whatever you like to do. But I think the presence of trapping moves / abilities when paired with Perish Song would actually be healthy for the metagame. In a world without attacks, Pokemon have more liberty to hold different items, some of which have become obsolete due to the absence of physical and special moves, such as the Choice Band, Knife Orb, Choice Specs, etc., but others instead see relevancy, like the Ability Shield and Lumberry, which have the potential to excel thanks to the excellent utility they offer in certain scenarios. One such item I think would see a rise in usage along with this newfound leeway is the Shed Shell. This item lets the user switch out regardless of trapping moves and abilities, making them practically unaffected by Perish Song, since they are free to bail out on any turn they like. In addition to this, Ghost types have an inherent immunity to being trapped, making Perish Trap much more manageable. This isn't to say that it would be an unviable strategy, since not all Pokemon are going to be holding that specific item, and a Shadow Tag Gothitelle is bound to come in once in a while and make some eardrums bleed. This brings us to the final segment of the video. Top Pokemon. What Pokemon would be the cream of the crop in a metagame where only status moves are present? It's probably no surprise that Gliscor is one of the strongest contenders for this title. Not only does it provide excellent utility by setting up Stealth Rock and Spikes, as well as spreading poison with Toxic, Gliscor's ability Poison Heal restores an 1/8 of its health at the end of every turn as long as it's poisoned, which it can easily achieve by holding the Toxic Orb item. Being permanently poisoned also means that Gliscor is not susceptible to other status conditions like burn or sleep, and the substantial amount of healing it accumulates makes it even harder to get rid of. However, this strategy is not entirely foolproof. In Generation 8, the Weezing and Galarian Weezing line received the signature ability Neutralizing Gas. This ability nullifies the effects of all other abilities on the field as long as Weezing is present. This essentially does the same as the move Gastro Acid, both of which can suppress Gliscor's Poison Heal, making it vulnerable to its own Poison Chip. Would this be an effective Gliscor wall? Perhaps, since the lack of damaging moves means that it can't hit Weezing with an otherwise super effective Earthquake, but maybe the ban of items like the Toxic Orb and Flame Orb could be implemented to prevent players from making their own Pokemon invulnerable to status moves. What are your thoughts? Would you want to try this metagame out if it existed? Feel free to leave your comments below, and thanks for watching. Have a great day.